I just got what is probably the greatest speedrun of my life. I finally managed to beat all of the nitro tracks, that's Mushroom Cup, Flower Cup, Star Cup, and Special Cup, on 200cc with no items in under 30 minutes. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all the things that I was thinking about when I was doing the run and explain why it was such a huge accomplishment for me. And since I don't plan on getting to like fully fleshed out tutorials for the basic training videos on 200cc, I'm also going to explain the techniques and the strategies so that hopefully you can get some idea of how this run is supposed to work, especially after watching the full run, which I will also upload as an unlisted video. Anyways, that's enough intro. Hope you all enjoy. Now, believe it or not, the problems start on the settings screen before the run even begins, and that's because we need to set the CPU difficulty to hard. This doesn't matter too much in terms of CPU speed because, honestly, with just a bit of practice, it's not too hard to lap them on most tracks. The actual issue here is that when CPUs are set to hard, they are relentless in trying to run into you, even in situations where doing so would cause them to go into the off-road or even fall off the track, as you can see from this dumbass right here. This problem becomes readily apparent within the first 5 seconds of the very first course of the run, Mario Kart Stadium. We want to start out this track by doing an Ultra Mini Turbo through this patch of grass, but doing so quickly requires that we take a good line prior to that, and this is prime real estate for CPU tomfoolery. Fortunately, the shortcut itself isn't too difficult, which is more than I can say for the next two. For both of them, the idea is to release the Mini Turbo early and then jump with your joystick in a neutral position, which for whatever reason gives you a bit more distance on the jump. I wouldn't call the shortcuts hard, but they can be pretty finicky, and it's not at all uncommon to lose time here. The final hairpin turn after the shortcuts isn't really that problematic, but there is an interesting thing that we're doing here where we Super Mini Turbo instead of Ultra Mini Turbo. The reason for this is due to something called boost cannibalization. The Cliff's Notes version is that the Super Mini Turbo is really all we need to make it to the ramp, and the Ultra Mini Turbo takes so much time to build up that we won't really be able to get full use out of that boost anyways. But that's it for Mario Kart Stadium, let's move on to Water Park. If you haven't gotten the stair rant yet, here it is. Stairs f***ing suck in this game, okay? They ruin literally every track they're in, and this one is no exception. You want to drift around this turn quickly? It'd sure be a shame if you were to get 10 million years of airtime and lose half a second for no reason, wouldn't it? Now, if you approach the stairs at kind of a hard angle and don't futz with the joystick while going up them, you can avoid this nonsense fairly consistently, but it's by no means a guarantee. Speaking of not futzing with the joystick, that's a technique called neutral drifting, which is when you drift with your joystick completely centered. This is more or less what we're trying to do around the gigantic loop-de-loop on each lap, because drifting with your joystick in any other position causes you to move a little bit more slowly. After that, we got kind of an obnoxious strategy where we have to do a couple of counter hops before the final turn of the lap, but aside from that, Water Park doesn't really cause too many issues most of the time. Next up is Sweet Sweet Canyon. This is probably the only relatively free course in the entire run, at least the way that I play it. The new tech we're going to go over here is called Fast Glider, and the way it works is that rather than trick off this glider ramp, we're going to jump on top of the glider instead. This is because mechanically, the glider works by dramatically increasing your speed to help you clear this big gap. But this doesn't happen until your glider's fully out. Hopping on top of the ramp causes the glider to come out more quickly, saving about 1/10 of a second per lap. After that, we're neutral drifting the long right turn, and then when coming out of the water, we need to soft drift around this turn with the chocolate on the right. And what is soft drifting? Well, I'm glad you asked, convenient and purely fictitious viewer. When you're drifting, pointing your joystick in the direction of your drift and anywhere slightly above or below the horizontal will cause you to charge mini turbos quickly. The exact angle is approximately 45 degrees, and soft drifting just means to drift with your joystick at one of these shallower angles. The reason this is beneficial is that for most of the turns in the game, you don't want to hold a hard right or a hard left because you'll run into a wall or fall off the track. So soft drifting allows us to maintain good racing lines while still charging mini turbos quickly, and that's how I'm able to build up the Super Mini Turbo as fast as I do. Now, I mentioned that this is the only real free track of the run, but that's not really true. There's an alternative strategy you can do where you take the blue path on laps 2 and 3, which apparently saves a bit of time, but it's also a colossal pain in the ass to learn, so I've just never really bothered with it. Now, I want to apologize for a couple of things. First off, I know the speedrun breakdown so far has been kinda tech heavy, but believe it or not, we've covered about 90% of the actual tech we're gonna need for the run. The second thing I need to apologize for is the monstrosity of the track that is Thwomp Ruins. If you thought the stairs on Water Park pissed me off, boy are you in for a treat here. Because unlike Water Park, we need to go straight up the stairs as opposed to coming at them from the side. Additionally, we need to not only build up 2 mini turbos in quick succession just before the stairs, but we also need to trick off this dumbass ramp that's at the edge of the stairs. And I get this trick maybe 25% of the time at best. To be clear, this is probably just a skill issue on my part, and I'm sure there's a consistent setup for this, but that doesn't make it any less frustrating since my time trial personal best is probably about 1.5 seconds to even 2 seconds faster because of this one section of the track. Fortunately, this is the last set of stairs we're going to see in the run. Unfortunately, the worst by far is yet to come. But first, we have Mario Circuit. This track is definitely one of the tracks of all time. There's really not a lot happening here aside from the fact that you need to soft drift around every turn, which, as you can see from the fact that my head is wobbling back and forth like an epileptic hamster that just got done watching an episode of Pokemon, is something I need a little bit more work on. And just in case you're wondering, no, that shroomless shortcut isn't the least bit hard, which makes it pretty mind-boggling how many runs of mine it's killed over the years. But let's not dawdle, because now we are on to the first actual gatekeeper track of the run, Toad Harbor. Really, there's two main areas that are going to give you problems here. The first problem spot is right after the alternate path shortcut on lap 1, where we need to grab some coins behind this trolley, but that requires that you're on a good pace so that it's not facing too far to the right. The second problem spot is the alternate path shortcut itself, which is 100% consistent as long as you're not dog water at the game like I am. You need to drift off the ramp here instead of tricking so that you can avoid running into the wall. The issue is that you need to start this drift at kind of a precise angle, otherwise you'll either miss the shortcut entirely or else clip the wall on the left. Now, if we were using Bitty Buggy, this wouldn't be too problematic because Bitty Buggy tends to just bounce off walls, but Teddy Buggy has this nasty tendency to treat walls like industrial cement, and you will get stuck in them and lose all your speed. Other than that, Toad Harbor is not too problematic, but there's one thing to point out here, which is that at the end of the run you can see that I've got a little bit over 2 seconds of time save. It seems pretty sick, right? But it's actually suck. What happened was that in my previous personal best, I accidentally hit view highlights instead of next race on Mario Circuit, and this cost me almost 3 seconds. If you look at my splits, you'll notice that this dumbass mistake literally cost me my first ever sub 30. But what's more important is that this means that in order to actually get a new personal best, I need to beat my previous personal best by at least 3 seconds so that I can have a run that beats both the real time and the in-game time of the previous run. Keep that in mind, it'll come up later. Moving on, we've thankfully got a little bit of breathing room here. Twisted Mansion is a course that I'd describe as hard to learn, but easy to execute. The only things I can see giving you any issues are the S-turn and the post-glider hairpin turn, both of which can be pretty tricky to figure out how to navigate without brake drifting. For the former, all you really need to do is release your mini-turbos quickly, and for the latter, you need to approach the track at kind of a low angle and start turning a bit before you actually land. The frustrating thing about this course is that on lap 3, if you're fast enough you can get 2 tricks off the waves at the start, which saves about half a second over missing that cycle. So it's like, you either get a decent time or a god-awful time. There is no in-between there. Speaking of god-awful, here's Shy Guy Falls. This is the second track where CPUs will try to go out of their way to destroy you at the very start of the run. It's not super common and fairly easy to avoid, but losing a run this way after making it past Toad Harbor is straight up soul-crushing. The only other point to note is the shortcut at the end of the lap, which, like Mario Kart Stadium, requires you to release your mini-turbo a little bit early before actually doing the jump. Now, I glossed over the orange boost pads, but they're pretty straightforward as long as you're on a halfway decent pace because they're going to be in the same configuration on all 3 laps, again, at least on 200cc. Sunshine Airport's up next, and there's really not a lot to talk about here other than the final glider, where we build up an Ultra Mini Turbo and then jump over the glider. This is not Fast Glider like we saw in Sweet Sweet Canyon. What's happening here is that when you trick off a glider, it resets your speed before giving you the trick boost, which means that if you're in the middle of an Ultra Mini Turbo, it'll get eaten by the trick. So it's actually faster in this case to just keep the Ultra Mini Turbo instead. Dolphin Shoals up now, and from here on out, every single track in the run has the potential to end your run out of nowhere. I've had some kind of funny haha whining already in the video about runs dying, but with the exception of Toad Harbor, time losses on all the other tracks amount to no more than a second at most, and that's if you're really playing like a turd. When I say your run will end here, I mean that mistakes aren't like, oh no, I missed a soft drift, but oh no, I fell off and Lakitu's smoking crack, so I lost 5 seconds. Well, guess I gotta reset. On Dolphin Shoals, this comes from the first wide left turn in the underwater section. On lap 1, we need to grab both the coins, and on laps 2 and 3, we need to do this weird strat where we kind of hover above the first pipe and then face plant into the dirt before tricking off the second pipe. The problem is that underwater physics in this game are straight up ass, and it's not at all uncommon to either mess up the strats or even fall off the track. There's another kind of tricky section at the end of the run where you want to build up an Ultra Mini Turbo and then soft drift before doing a Mini Turbo trick off the glider. Like Twisted Mansion, I'd describe this as more hard to learn than hard to execute, but I've got a pretty ridiculous clip from a previous run where I fell off the glider and still somehow managed by the grace of God to not lose the run right there. Electrodrome is up next, and it's one of the most deceptively simple tracks in the run. There's a lot of turns that are really long and wide, and they all need to be taken in a very specific way. For example, on the very first turn, you might think that this is like Sweet Sweet Canyon strats where you want to neutral drift the whole time, but as it turns out, you actually want to soft drift here, because starting the right drift in the musical track section as early as possible is necessary to take a tight turn there. Then, for the next right turn, you want to neutral drift the whole time. It's weird because you think you're doing everything right, but then you get to the end of the run and you find you've lost more than a second for seemingly no reason. I'm telling you, try this track shroomless for yourself, and if you can get below a 130, comment down below because that's a really impressive feat. Mount f***ing Wario coming up, and oh my god do I hate this track. Actually, that's not true. I do love the track, just not in a 200cc speedrun. The first couple sections are more of what we've already seen in other tracks, with a lot of soft drifting to accomplish strats that are tricky to learn but not so much to execute. But then at the end of section 2, we've got the showstopper. To navigate this section without having multiple trees shoved up your anus, you'll have to not fiddle with the joystick at all until you get past most of the stumps, at which point you need to land quickly while grabbing the coin. If you did all this properly, you'll move in between the final 2 stumps here, and if you didn't, run's over. And even if you did do it properly, we have this load of horse at the start of section 3 where you want to get a super mini turbo and then trick off this ramp and then land in a wide left drift without building up a mini turbo, which will buy you time to avoid the wall and slow you down a bit to make it through the slalom section unscathed. You have to be set up for this perfectly before even going off the ramp, and the problem is you can't even see what it is you're aiming for until after you're already in midair. This stuff is fine in time trials where you can restart over and over again and lose no more than like a minute of your life, but like I said before, in speedruns, it's incredibly frustrating to have to constantly reset 17 minutes into a run. But unfortunately, that's kind of just how this particular category is. Welcome to Cloud Top Cruise, which is hands down my favorite course in the run, at least as far as the vibe is concerned. It's one of those tracks though where every second needs to be precisely mapped out, and there's very little margin for error here. This is because of the lightning section on each lap. The pattern of the lightning strikes is going to be the same every time you run the track, and the path you have to take each time will change depending on your pace, so being consistent is super important here. There's not too much that can realistically go wrong aside from clipping this barrel on laps 2 and 3, despite the fact that the shortcut at the end might look scary as hell. Bone Dry Dunes, on the other hand, is a gigantic nightmare from start to finish. The CPUs are back again to ruin our day, particularly by preventing us from doing the shortcut at the start of the run properly, and after that, we've got to go into the dunes. You need to take a very specific line that kind of follows the waviness of the track so that you can avoid getting airtime, because this will absolutely end your run immediately. This section of the track is also problematic on laps 2 and 3 because to get through quickly, you need to go on the right-hand path, but doing so is incredibly difficult due to how precise the line needs to be and how little time you have to actually set up for it. This is why I purposely take the left path and just release the Ultra Mini Turbo as soon as I get it. Coins are also really hard to grab on this track, particularly for the turn after the glider. With the exception of maybe the start of each lap, there's really not a single moment of the run where you're not in danger of dying. And unfortunately, this is also true for the next track in the run, which is Bowser's Castle. The CPUs are back yet again to screw us up at the start of the run, and this time it's with the coin lines. There's a fairly consistent path through here, which is to purposely take a wide line at the start and then grab the leftmost coin, at which point you're mostly safe from CPUs, but the headaches are far from over, and that's because this course is filled to the brim with obstacles that operate on cycles such as the fireball spinners, the spike ball, and the lava Bowser. Alone, none of these are individually that hard to deal with, but when put together, this makes Bowser's Castle the most unforgiving track of the run, because on 200cc there is no reaction time at play. You pretty much just have to memorize exactly where everything is going to be at whatever pace you're currently on. And if you're faster or slower by even a couple tenths of a second, this can throw off your entire run. And no, I'm not exaggerating about that. And the worst part about the track is the first ramp in the spike ball section, which can randomly decide to just stop working for no apparent reason. If this happens, you're pretty much f***ed, and I can't even begin to explain how soul-crushing it is to lose runs that way. Fortunately, after making out of that bit of hell, we are on to Rainbow Road. This is a course where 100% of the pain comes from the fact that we're trying to get through it fast. In a time trial, you need to take the first couple hairpin turns by doing this weird hopping strategy and then brake drifting as little as possible. But when you're on the kind of pace I was here, you pretty much just say screw it and slow down as much as you need to avoid falling off the track. Honestly, the only real issue is the path switching shortcut, which I promise is much easier than it looks. I can nail this thing 100% of the time when I'm time trialing, but the problem is that by this point in a speedrun, your nerves are totally shot, especially if you're on a good pace like I was, and I lost my 3 previous attempts at this category on lap 3 due to this bullshit. If you watch the full run, which I've linked to in the description, you'll see that I was super quiet here because I was focusing so hard on closing things out, and I'll just let you watch my reaction here. I did it, boys. Yes. Oh. Jeez. My God. Dude. Dude, right? Oh my God. I thought I was gonna die on lap 2. I was like, fucking no, not like this. Not like this. Oh my God. And that is the Nitro tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on 200cc with no items, beaten in under 30 minutes. Hopefully you all found this entertaining, and let me know if you like this commentated version of the run, or if you just want me to upload the full run directly in the future. Before we close out this video, I just want to say that this really was a huge accomplishment for me. That's partly because this is the last minute barrier that I will ever break in this category, but also because, if you'll recall earlier, this run was fast enough to beat both my real time and also the in-game time, so this actually is the best run that I've ever done in this category. Even if I do end up beating this one day, which I definitely can do, I just don't think that any other runs in the future can ever be as impactful and as nerve-wracking as this one was to put together, so I'm glad that I got to share it with you all today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and let me know if you'd like to see similar videos for other categories in the future. Thanks for watching, everyone.